first thing I wanted to show you was when it comes to the AI box, there's two pieces of software that we can utilize to find it on the network. Traditionally, we use the MD load tool, which is this one right here. The tool is older than the AI box. So what ends up happening is it finds the AI box by its MAC address. It'll let you know the IP address. And depending on the firmware that is on the AI box, you can typically go in and update the network settings for the AI box through the software. What the MD load software doesn't show you is the actual information of the model right here. If you don't have the tool, it is available on our website. So if you went to Ganz Security and go to our website, go to support and go right to Resource Center. From Resource Center, you can go right to software. There's also tools and calculators for other product, but that's more of an FYI. Go to software. I'm going to scroll down and I believe it's on page 2 right there. So Pixel Pro multi-upgrade tool, MD load, version 4.60. The Pixel Pro Discovery tool, version 4, that's an older version of it, and it's not going to detect any of the current generation Pixel Pro hardware or AI box. So don't bother with 4.0. You want to get MD load 4.6. That's going to be your primary tool. Now I'm going to give you a sneak peek, so to speak. We have a beta tool that we've been testing. This is the iDevice Manager. This is the tool that's eventually replacing the MD load tool. Now, without going into the tool itself, just know that it's a discovery tool. It'll allow you to do a lot of different things, from IP settings to firmware updates, setups, the AI box specifically, system, info, a whole bunch of stuff. The goal of this tool is to give you a centralized manager for all our Pixel Pro and Pixel Pro related hardware, like our DigiMaster, our Pixel Master, and our AI box. That said, the discovery tool is designed for local networks. So I'm not aware of any discovery tool per se that would allow you to do things remotely, only because usually your devices have to have some sort of redundancy in them for error correction. And when you're transmitting stuff over a remote network and not a local, you can run into all kinds of issues. If a packet is dropped, if a piece of information is corrupt, you're not local to the device. And if that device doesn't have redundancy built into it, in other words, like a backup firmware built directly into it, or a secondary BIOS, that device goes down, you're going to have to go there physically to bring that device back online. So remote upgrading, it's not one that, from my experience, is highly recommended unless you know specifically that device affords redundancy for remote updating. I get the question asked a lot, so it's a common question, and a lot of it stems from the fact that we're all used to Windows. Windows, we can just turn around and do updates remotely from Microsoft. But what we need to take into account is that your basic PC, one, you're typically on it, so you've got local access directly to it, even though Microsoft might be remote. So if anything happens, you're there to basically power cycle that PC. Unfortunately, from a camera or a net appliance, DVR, NVR, if you're remote to that device, it's an opposite scenario. You just, if something happens, you're about to lose time and labor to get there and kind of correct the issue. And that's if the device hasn't been bricked, and it becomes a whole different nightmare. That said, from the iDevice Manager, again, you'll see it's similar in aesthetic to what we have with the MD load tool. It will list all devices. In this case, we can actually see by model the AI box. And again, keeping things simple, we just double click on that, and that'll bring us into the box. We should see our login screen, and that's just going to be admin, all capital. Default password is 1234. Bear in mind, from a best practices standpoint, obviously you don't want to leave any device at its default user ID and password. One of the practices I typically do is I will have a installer password. So when I'm working on the device on location, if it's going to be something that's going to take place over time, in other words, I can't do it all that day, and there's concerns about the user potentially accessing the device, I will change the default password to what I call an installer password. It's, again, a temporary password, but it's one that every person in the installation team knows. And it serves as a temporary password until we're ready for full deployment. And then at that point, you can either leave that as your admin level password and generate a new user with associated password for the local administrator if one is going to be assigned to the device or devices. If you're not going to have anybody else other than you on your installation team access it, then you know that that installation password everyone's going to know if they ever have to come on site and make changes to the device. So it's just a best practice. Never leave a device with the default password, because anyone can just look it up on the web. If you go and you Google Pixel Pro camera default password, guess what's going to come up? That's a security hole you really don't want.